Okay, so we are live on YouTube. I'll just confirm you can see us.
Yep.
Okay, so we are live. Sorry, yeah.
We are live.
Okay.
We are live.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Karwaan, the Heritage Exploration Initiative. I'm Ishan Sharma, founder of Karwaan, and we are back with another panel discussion where we are commemorating or remembering the 75 years of partition. Uh, Karwaan Baithak Sarhad ke is par us par, where we are trying to establish a cross-border conversation about that line that that connects us. I was reading a book where it said the line that divides, but now the perspective changes, that the line that connects us. And one of the connecting dots of our relation with, say, Pakistan or Bangladesh remains food, which is rather less talked about in academia, unfortunately, as far as I know. But to re-establish this dialogue, we are fortunate to have joined by four wonderful speakers. And I'm here with my co-host Sadaf Hussain, who is a wonderful author and a better chef than an author, maybe. But I am yet to taste
It's a toss-up.
Biryani is pending.
Biryani is pending, as I always mention in the beginning of the conversation, and Pushpesh Saab has approved your culinary skills. So that gives a testament to your skill. But coming back to the conversation, we have had three conversations. This is the fourth in the series. We had a conversation on the connection between India, Pakistan, in the sense where we talked about two case studies of Lahore and Delhi. Then we had three young, dynamic oral historians to talk about the oral history aspect of our partition. And the last conversation that we had were two feminist scholars, Ritu Man and Urvashi Butalia, talking about women and the impact of partition on them. Today's session, Sanjha, Chulha, is all about food, shared history on food, where we'll talk about the Punjabi food or the Bangla food, or in the way Hindustani food. Um, I'll leave the terminology to the experts, but so I'll start with the introduction of our speakers, and then Sadaf Bhai, please take over. Uh, so Professor Pushpesh Pant is a noted Indian academic, food critic, and historian, and you have seen him on Karwaan a couple of times earlier as well. He retired as a professor of international relations from JNU, and he's one of India's leading experts on international relations as well as Indian cuisine. And a columnist who has written for a number of major publications like Forbes, Open, Outlook.
We can leave it at that, Ishan. We can leave it at that. Down with business.
Sure, sir. And our second speaker, Mariam Jilani, she is currently in Philippines, Manila. She started a website called Pakistani Eats, which is a tribute to the cuisine that has been a bridge between her heritage, her family, and adopted homes. In 2017, Pakistan Eats was a finalist for Sevo Blog Award Best New Voice, and in 2018 won the Sevo Editor's Choice for Best Food Culture. In 2021, it was selected by the Library of Congress to be part of its Food and Foodways web archives. So thank you so much to both of you for joining in. Over to Sadaf Bhai.
Thank you, Ishan. And the other two esteemed panelist speakers, favorite people as well. One, we have Pritha Sen. Even though Gurgaon based, she was a former journalist, an expert in food history, who wondered finding food. One thing that I have found out about her, that she believes that there's nothing as lost recipe. You just have to find it, which is a great thing, because why not? And the other thing is, she also looks at the regional cuisines, and as well as specifically to the cuisines of Bengal. Then we have got Chef Ranveer Brar. I don't have the words how to. I mean, one of my dear chefs. He is chef, author, presenter, anchor, and now an actor. If you have seen him on Amazon Prime's Modern Love. So it's Just an honor to have all the four of amazing people to talk about food, Sanjha, Chulha. Um, we will follow the usual pattern, which is we
Yeah.
go and opening thing, then Ishan will explain that.
Yeah, so
Go
the,
ahead.
the format of our conversation, as always, is that we'll have the opening remarks from all our speakers for about 10 minutes each. And then we'll get into the conversation. Sadhbhai will open the conversation, and then we'll take some audience questions in between. And a special thing about the format is the speakers are also allowed to ask each other questions. It's not just the moderators, but speakers are free to ask questions. So let's start with Chef Barar, because I think he's a little under the weather. So we'll give him the first chance. So Chef Barar, over to you if you can unmute.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the other speakers allowing me the time first. I think what I will sort of do is, in terms of, because I'm speaking first, sort of set a context for us and for the viewers. You know, and I personally, every Punjabi household who has come from the undivided Punjab towards this side always has heard one thing, and that is Jinalo Orni Vekhya Jammain. You've grown up listening to this, and you just wondered what was wrong with your grandparents. That's all that they would say. Everything would fail against Lahore, and that's what I grew up listening to all my life, and I always used to wonder what is the big deal, as a kid growing up. Fortunately, I took up a profession, and fortunately, I took to reading to really understand what they really meant. I always say, somebody in this case, it happened to be Mr. Radcliffe, picked up a pen and drew a few lines, and we just assumed that culture would just be split into two, or in this case, into four. और वो जो काश ऐसा हो पाता, बट एक सब कॉन्टिनेंट की छाप और एक कल्चर की डेफिनेशन जो है वो कहीं गहरी. There's a funny joke, and I think Preeta Di will bring it up later as well, कि हम कितने लकीर के फकीर हो गए उस लकीर के पीछे, कि जब रैटक्लिफ लाइन खींच रहे थे बंगाल की साइड, तो उस समय there used to be the pen used to be the dip and sort of draw sort of a pen, right? तो कुछ छींटे पड़ गए, यहाँ भी छींटे पड़ गए और वहाँ भी छींटे पड़ गए. अब हमने उन छींटों को भी we wanted to make sure that we give a name to those cheetahs as well, because we wanted to be perfect as लकीर के फकीर. We called those cheetahs conclaves. और जो छींटे बांग्लादेश में पड़े वो हिंदुस्तान थे, और जो छींटे हिंदुस्तान में पड़े वो बांग्लादेश थे. और आज भी ऐसे कॉन्क्लेव्स हैं जो कि सिर्फ वो छींटे हैं जो रैटक्लिफ की इंक से पड़े. There are these small conclaves still. We have resolved a lot of these conclaves, but what I'm trying to say is that we took that line and those spots on the map so seriously that for at least for the first few years we really didn't know what was happening. It was only much later we realized that the culture that we shared is much stronger than the line that was drawn, or the ink that was spilled. And I think that is why I was excited to be a part of this conversation. I think it's very, very important. It's very, very important to understand the concept of Bengal and Punjab, and to understand, because a lot of times when I speak to my friends who are not from Punjab, for us, for a long time, there used to be Lahore used to be where my Amritsar and Lahore used to be a cycling journey. In the olden times, my grandfather got posted. तो एक होल्डॉल, आगे साइकिल पे दादी बैठी, पीछे होल्डॉल था, दो पीपे टांगे, और लाहौर से अमृतसर ट्रांसफर होके आगे पूरे. The whole family came like that. So for us to believe that it's a different country takes a long time. Similarly, for for somebody in Bengal to believe that it's a different country, and believe in the projection that we've been made to believe in, it's very difficult, because the banter at the most in Bengal would probably be about which Ilish is better. That is the animosity to the maximum, or whether it is Bengal food or Ghoti food, or you Ghotis don't know what cooking is. You always add sugar in your food. You Bangals are all these farmers. You don't know what finesse is. That is the level of animosity that is seen on tables. Here, if I go and travel, whether I go to Qatar, most of my friends, they wait for me to come down, and then they make sure that their mom, who's from Lahore, would cook something, or we go to restaurants, and I think that is the culture still remains a bigger connect. The Punjabiyat and the whole idea of Bengal still remains a bigger connect. And so I'm glad that this is happening. I'll just leave it at that. And then gradually, if need be, I'll pitch in the finer details as and when questions get asked.
Thank you, Chef Barar. Mariam, if you can unmute and present your opening remarks.
Sure. A second. So I'll start by telling you guys a little bit about my history. So on the eve of partition, my Dadi Kulsum, she was studying at Aligarh College in Delhi, and she got a phone call from her older brother Azhar. I'm picking you up. We're leaving for Pakistan. The phone call had caught her by complete surprise. Her entire family was based in Panipat, and her father had insisted that they would not leave. But in the lead up to partition, the situation had become so frightening that they felt they had no choice. Kulsum's family had already left for Lahore, and they had tasked Azhar to bring her to Pakistan with him. Meanwhile, my grandfather Salim, he was about 15 at the time. He was on a truck in Jalandhar with his parents and siblings on his way to their new home in Gujranwala. My Nana Dilawar Hassan was on a train leaving from Delhi with his wife, 3 young children, and a box of documents from the Ministry of Education. He was employed by the Indian Civil Service, and following partition was tasked with helping set up the new ministry in Pakistan. My entire family, from my mother and father's side, moved from Eastern Punjab. They left their homes and their belongings, and they sort of had to wait to be reunited with their relatives, and who continue to trickle in Lahore and Karachi in the following weeks. So I'm rooted in Eastern Punjab, but I know very little about how my grandparents lived, what their homes were like, what their neighborhoods were like. In fact, until this session, I didn't even know how 3 out of 4 of my grandparents migrated. A couple of years ago, I was doing a story on Sindhi cuisine, both in India and Pakistan, and I was speaking to my friend Pooja Makhijani. She's a Sindhi American food writer based in New Jersey. And she had mentioned that the elders in her family never spoke about their move or their time in refugee camps after leaving Pakistan. She talks about how they seem to have erased that entire part of their lives from memory. And I think that might be the reason why I know very little about my family's roots in Eastern Punjab or the move. And this isn't really unique. I think many others in Pakistan whose grandparents and great-grandparents moved from now on can't fully grasp what happened and what exactly was left behind. And this is why food's a beautiful keeper of memory. But sometimes gets left out of conversations, shows up in the table, in the kitchen, in our bazaars. And, I could see it in Rawalpindi. It's the city I'm most familiar with. I'm from Islamabad, and it's the sister city. It's right outside. And Rawalpindi was a predominantly Hindu and Sikh city in a predominantly Muslim majority area. So it was heavily affected by partition, both in terms of the exodus of wealthy Hindu and Sikh traders and an influx of refugees from various parts of Delhi and Eastern Punjab. And we all know that it was many migrants from Rawalpindi who brought chole bhature to parts of India, and it was Muslim migrants from Delhi that brought a more refined style of cuisine from the Delhi Sultanate and Mughal period to Rawalpindi. There was no Delhi and Pindi prior to the partition. The city had a much simpler cuisine. But the city that probably underwent the most significant culinary transformation was definitely Karachi. Karachi is a city of Mohajir. And while it was already a cosmopolitan city during British colonial rule because of its proximity to the cotton producing regions of Sindh and Punjab, it attracted, traders from, states like Goa, Gujarat, Karnataka. It also became a culinary hub that it is today because of partition. And while many migrants from Eastern Punjab, such as migrant parents, just moved to Western Punjab, Karachi welcomed Muslim refugees from all parts of India, particularly regional elites. So Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Bombay, Rajasthan, and Delhi. So it's very different from other parts of Pakistan. And it's the city kind of, these ethnic groups clustered in different neighborhoods. And so the city is kind of ethnically segregated, and you'll find that in the culinary landscape as well, where regional cuisine is sort of grouped together within the city. Now, the influx of Muslim elites from places like Lucknow and Hyderabad had this really profound effect on food in Pakistan. It essentially brought like haute cuisine into the country. And this had two effects. One was its impact on Punjabi food. I've already talked about Rawalpindi and how its surrounding area had a much simpler cuisine. But you also saw this sort of happening inside people's home. Like there are traces of Awadhi cuisine even within homes that have no connection to UP, including my family. And you see this with Hyderabadi cuisine too, especially pronounced in Karachi. And the second effect, which culture writer Emir Naqvi has mentioned in his work, is that while this partition brought this high-end cuisine from states like UP and Hyderabad, the migration experience paved the way for these migrants to break from culinary tradition. But he doesn't frame it in terms of cultural loss. He calls it cultural innovation and experimentation. He's like, and he specifically relates this to biryani. And it's very interesting because he's like, because of the migration experience, people felt free to bake from culinary tradition. Like they didn't need to be snooty about it. And that's why biryani in Karachi was transformed from like this really refined high-end dish to a street food. And now there's so many dozens of varieties of biryani that sort of defy like an easy categorization. So yes, partition did enrich the cuisine of what is now Pakistan. It also kind of, there's a negative side to it. And what that is that it impacted it sort of impacted like kind of the sort of I'll go ahead and call it erasure of simpler local cuisines of settled communities that lacked the economic and cultural capital of Punjabi or Urdu speaking elites. Sindhi cuisine is an especially good example. When the wealthier Hindu Sindhi traders left for India, they coalesced around the rich culinary tradition. And we know that the migrant experience always brings you closer to your food. But in Pakistan, Sindhi cuisine completely lacks visibility. You don't find it in restaurants in Karachi. You really have to go to interior Sindh to sort of get a feel for it. There's similarly a lack of understanding of cuisine from Balochistan, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, even like Saraiki speaking parts of Punjab. And part of this reason, and I'm going to get a bit political, is that it's because of the state building efforts of Pakistan, especially in the early years. There was focus on a very narrow identity. And this did blow up in our face with the independence of Bangladesh in 1971, which is, and we've repeatedly seen the promotion and proliferation of culture, which includes culinary traditions of only a couple of different, types of group, Urdu speaking and Punjabi elites. And this is why the work of author and vlogger Nilofer Qazi, I'm going to put in a big plug for her work. She runs the YouTube series Pakistan on a Plate. It's really important. She's on a mission to document the hyper-localized cuisine, ingredients, culinary practices of different districts of Pakistan in an effort to sort of preserve and promote the food of local settled communities. She's not doing it at the expense of migrants, but she just really also, it's more about communities that lack the cultural and economic capital. I think there is growing sensitivity around culinary traditions, and I think we might be turning a corner. We're also seeing Pakistani government promote food tourism, and I hope we're moving towards a more expansive and textured notion of what Pakistani culinary traditions are. But yeah, I think those are my opening remarks for now, and I'm happy to chat further. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariam. Preetha ma'am, if you can unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. And it's really a pleasure to be here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So it's been very interesting listening to Ranveer and Mariam both speak, because the Bengal scenario is very different from what happened in Delhi. You know, because in Delhi, the displaced came in and changed the face of food in Delhi. They created everything that we see today. It was an enterprising spirit. And today, what is projected as Indian food to the world outside is basically what was created by them. Your program is entitled Sanjha Chulha. They brought the Sanjha Chulha with them and made it work. And it's now gone all over the world. But that's not what happened in Bengal. Bengal, it's a little sad what happened with partition. Now, to understand that, one must know about the lay of undivided Bengal. So there was always West Bengal and East Bengal. And there was the river running through. And but the difference was that West Bengal was but a much smaller part of entire undivided Bengal. East Bengal was a vast territory that kind of bordered on, Burma and right up to Assam in the northeast. And West Bengal was much smaller than that. The population was much lesser. And West Bengal had only one major river. Now, this has an impact, had only one major river. And East Bengal had three major rivers, the Padma, the Meghna, and the mighty Brahmaputra. And apart from that, innumerable rivulets and streams and tributaries and ponds. And therefore, you can visualize or even understand the terrain, which was lush. East Bengal had the lion's share of the mangrove forests that is so very biodiverse. So obviously, the food there was in abundance. You had a wider variety, a wider repertoire. You had about 500 leafy green vegetables, 500. You had greens, different kinds of greens. You had over 300 varieties of fish, or if not more. Whereas in West Bengal, the abundance was not as much. You didn't get as much as they got in East Bengal. And fish-wise too, it was more limited to carps, large carps. So when partition happened, what happened was East Bengalis with their entire micro-regional food culture. There were many different regions in East Bengal, and which were famous for their cuisine. One was, of course, Dhaka, Bikrampur. Then there was Sylhet. Then there was Mymensingh. There was Chittagong. There was Khulna. And each area had its own special produce. And therefore, it was a multicultural canvas. And it was also very closely connected with the tribal roots. And it was, there were many, many tribal districts also spread out, and the food kind of intermingled. But when it came to West Bengal, slowly with the rise of Calcutta as the capital, the snob value regarding food also grew. There was these zamindars who came in and they were vying with the British to establish affluence at the table. So because their repertoire was limited, it was the use of more and more richer ingredients to make the same dishes fancier. And so when partition happened and the displaced came into West Bengal, and it wasn't a small number. It wasn't like in Delhi, the population doubled overnight. In Bengal, the population must have tripled. It wasn't a small population at all. And so when they came in, before partition, like Ranveer Brar was saying, that there's this healthy banter happening between the Ghoti and the Bangal. The Bangal gets their name from what used to be Bangal Desh. That region used to be called Bangal Desh. So the Bangals, I draw my roots to that side. The Bangals that are come from originally Bangladesh, and the Ghotis are from West Bengal. Why Ghoti? Ghoti means a kalash, a pitcher. And the shape of West Bengal, from a narrow neck, it goes into a kalash kind of a shape. So it's Ghoti. And like they use Bangal in a good-natured derogatory way, we use Ghoti in a good-natured derogatory way. It was like a healthy competition. But when partition happened, it wasn't healthy. When partition happened, the displaced came in and took over spaces. There was no other option. Took over the spaces. It became a derogatory term. And it became a derogatory term. And the food that the Bangals had was looked down upon, because the Bangals had a very, very, like I said, repertoire, and they ate almost everything. They ate the leaves, the stalks, the roots, when it's, the fruits. And there was this tradition of having uncultivated foods, like say if you're growing jute, you have the jute leaves. That falls in the category of uncultivated foods. So they had uncultivated foods, and at the same time, when non-vegetarian was concerned, there were not very many, taboos on any kind of food. It was the Bangals ate everything from pigeon meat to peacock meat to turtle meat to all sorts of game birds, game fowl, and animals, from pork to beef. No, maybe the Hindus did not eat beef, but buff was allowed. So, but West Bengal, with its very, very deep-seated Vaishnavism, Sri Chaitanya was in West Bengal. And Vaishnavism took deep roots in West Bengal, looked down upon such eating. And icing on the cake for the Bangals were their love for fermented and dried fish and the smell. So when they came here, they were looked down upon as junglis, who didn't know anything. And they ate rubbish food. And when you hit out at food, you hit out at identity. You completely hit out at identity and your sense of being. So the Bengalis from the other side lived in a very apologetic state. And they were constantly trying to cover up for the kind of food they ate. And therefore, that food got suppressed. I've seen my mother do it. I've seen my mother not, people are praising some dish, but she's refusing to say what actually went into it. Because she knows that if she says it, there may be shock. That, oh my God, you put this in this. We never do that. We never do that. I've seen her do this. And when I was born 13 years after partition. So when I was growing up and I came to Calcutta actually at the age of 13, I still saw the refugee settlements. I saw how they lived. and how they were treated. And I joined a new school. That was my first experience of West Bengal. I joined a new school and I was laughed at for some of the words that I used in Bengali. Huh? So this is a very interesting thing about the impact that it had. What happened was that, if you tell me if I'm taking up more time, so what happened was that that food got suppressed, and Bangladesh is another story, which I shall do in the next phase.
Thank you so much, Preetha ma'am, and we were loving listening to you, but there are restrictions on time, but we'll come
Yeah.
to you again about
Yes.
Bangladesh. But Professor Pant,
Well, it's been absolutely fascinating listening to Prithadi as usual, and to Mariam before that. And I think I would try to do something as a contrarian, where I think the partition is not so much a loss of certain foods or recipes, and it is a net gain for the subcontinent. But before we get the historical chronology right, I think Prithadi would bear me out that there was an earlier partition which had a larger impact on the national psyche. That was the partition of Bengal ordered by Lord Curzon. And she did mention the vast expanse of Bengal, but that included, the Bengal footprint included Odisha, included Bihar. And this partition was the one which triggered off the Swadeshi movement and the Garam Dal and the Naram Dal. So
Yeah.
I think when we talk of partition, we are stuck with the partition which followed in the wake or came together with the independence of India, the Red Cliff Line. But I think there is other partitions which we must keep in mind. The other thing is that I think the problem with lines is there is a man-made border, which is the Radcliffe and the partition. But there are other borders which are blurred borders, which are not one continent being divided into three different countries. Take a fluid border, fuzzy border between India and Nepal, India and Sri Lanka, and the food has intermingled in these zones. That's one point I wanted to make to begin with. The second thing is, when I was listening to Mariam, I was very fascinated because I think she is very nuanced, and there's something which I find myself in total agreement with, that even without partition, there was a division, a partitioning of the mind, fragmentation of the mind. And if you go over the lines of the Indian national anthem, Jan Gan Man, etc., and then you say Punjab, Sindh, Gujarat, Maratha, Dravida, Utkala, Banga. So you practically are defining identities which divided the food as well, the Odia food, the Bengali food, the Dravid food, which is Tamil or the Malayali and so on. I was also touched by when Mariam said, when Radvir was said originally Punjabiyat, but Pakistan is more than Punjabiyat, is Punjabis and Pakhtuns and Balochs and Sindhis, and that's what the problem was. In India, we have had no less. When Nehru decided to have reorganization of linguistic states, the linguistic states divided the country, reinforced the divisions very, very categorically. So there is an Andhra food. There is now they have a problem because even linguistically, one, they have Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. So you have Mumbai and Gujarat, and you had Maharashtra and Gujarat. So these man-made borders at times aggravated the partitions which existed. I think in India, another interesting thing is there. Mariam made a very interesting point about the Muhajirs from India going and taking with them the legacy of the royal foods of Delhi. Now, unfortunately, royal foods of Delhi and royal foods of Awadh is a myth. The problem is that if you go over historically, Delhi never recovered from the shock of the ravages of Nadir Shah, Ahmed Shah Abdali, the looting and marauding hordes of Jats, Sikhs, Marathas. And by the time the 1857 took place, Delhi was ravaged after that by the British when they reconquered it. So you see the old photograph and you see the whole neighborhood in front of Jama Masjid razed to rubble. And then you have the food which you have is food of different communities. It was not a royal kitchens. They hardly could afford Bahadur Shah I, Bahadur Shah II, before Akbar Shah, Muhammad Shah Rangila. They were living on the pensions of the British ever since Lake took over Delhi after the Battle of Parparganj. So what are we talking about the royal kitchens of Delhi? There is a recreation of memory by people like they say last flame of the Oriental culture, Sharar Saab ka Lucknow Gujishta Lucknow ho, ya Delhi meri Delhi mein Munshi Saab ki Bidaye Zafar ka bayan ho. I think these are selective memories, and I probably have an advantage or a disadvantage. I am probably the oldest participant here, so I don't have to rely on anecdotal transmission of history from my grandparents about what some of it is my memory. Growing up in a small town in hills, we first encountered refugees where they were dispersed all over the land. And then we got to know the word refugee, and these refugees came from different parts. All of them were not from Lahore. They were, as Miriam rightly pointed out, somewhere from Pindi, somewhere from Multan, somewhere from Quetta, somewhere from Sindh. So the diversity of Punjab was realized by us very early. And I think when the Sanjha Chulha came to Delhi and the refugees brought their tandoor, I think they did a fascinating social reform thing. They made value for money food accessible to common people who were not refugees in Delhi, number one. Number two, they broke the caste barrier, but earlier, the caste had his food, the Bania had his food, the Brahmin has his food, the Khatri has his food, the Kashmiri had his food. All these foods were eaten inside their house. In the public domain, they did not eat. So this common denominator of the tandoori, which was affordable food, cooked before your eyes, healthy, you could eat that. And when the Punjabi refugee went all across the country, they carried with them this tandoor, and the paneer and the rajma and the tandoori murg, tandoori roti became almost like the national food of India. Now, the interesting part is this. Now there is a revival because the Hindu Sharanarthi refugee who came to India is acceptable. But if you have a resident Muslim who has not gone to Pakistan, he is an alien, he is the other. His food is like Saif Mahmood says very categorically, Aloo Hindu ka ho gaya, Bakra Muslim ka ho gaya. And this kind of food taboo which Prathadi referred to, has it come back with a terrible tsunami-like backlash that you can't forget about beef and pork. You can't even eat meat in Gurgaon on Tuesdays. The butchers are forcibly closed, and you have a problem eating meat publicly because somebody might say that what you are eating is not goat meat, it is beef meat. You will be lynched before and questions will be asked later. So I think the problem is that when we talk of food and partition, Mariam made a very interesting point. Can we separate food from politics? So if we have a relationship with Pakistan, which is hostile, can we celebrate the Punjabiyat or the Kashmiriyat and so on and so forth? So I will not go into details, but I do think that the problem is that if you have an ultra-right, ultra-nationalist government, either in Delhi or in Pakistan or in Bangladesh, blissfully, it has not come to Bangladesh in recent past, you have a problem of treating food and having divisive lines in eating a particular kind of food, vegetarian, non-vegetarian, and so on. The other point which I wish to make very emphatically is it is not only the partitioned India which suffered because of food. Take two parts of the country, the Valley of Kashmir, which was till a few years back the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and you take Hyderabad. Both of them became parts of Indian Union, but not entirely peacefully. The transition was not peaceful. At one stage, there was a war which was fought. At other stage, there was a police action, thinly disguised warfare. So, and also take the state of Bhopal, where it remained bang in the center heart of India, so to speak, but it was an orphaned state after the Nawab Sahib went away, leaving the state to his sister, and that's the way the succession is. So you would also have places like Kerala, which were not divided, but they had a large Muslim population, and you had food which was very different. And this food, again, was alien. Now, only recently what is happening is the different castes, different communities, different localities are getting into so to speak, microclimatic reasons of geographical indicators and saying this is our food, this is Chettiar food, this is Nadar food, this is Vaishya food, this is the Smartha food, this is the Iyer Iyengar food, this is the Kayast Bhatnagar food, this is the Kayast Mathur from Delhi food, and this is the Saxena Srivastava food. So there is a social class thing, which I think the ruling elite, the Ashrafs migrated to Pakistan, but not. What about those Muslims who did not go to Pakistan and retained their heritage, the professional cooks, the khidmatgars, the karigars, and they were suddenly without a job. They took other jobs. That, I think, was a real loss when certain hotels identified heritage chefs, pampered them, brought them to the kitchen, tried to rehabilitate them, but that process started much too late. In the process, much was lost. So there were these losses, but on the net side, I think the partition has been a gain because the Punjabi refugees, Saja, Chulha, the tandoor, till it became gentrified and we entered into the restaurants like Claridge's Dhaba in Delhi, or the other 5-star like the iconic Bukhara, which served essentially Dhaba food. That's where I think the problem arises, that we lost out on this homogenization of taste, that whatever you say, you go to a marriage banquet, you have the same set menu. To borrow the phrase from Noam Chomsky, manufacturing taste, it is manufacturing consent. So you have kali dal, you have kadhai paneer, you have butter chicken masala, you have murg tikka, you have paneer tikka, you have fish tikka. And this artificial creation for commercial reasons of homogenization of taste is a bit disastrous. And I think Prasad would bear me out in this also, but this reassertion of roots, ethnic roots, is largely the work of youngsters settled abroad, Indian diaspora, Pakistani diaspora, Sri Lankan diaspora. They rediscovered their foods. And it is where the ethnic foods are sort of, interest is being rekindled in that. But I think the moment we talk in terms of identity, what comes into my mind is home cooking. I mean, I remember Salman Rushdie's Shame, where this lady who's frustrated in a variety of ways deliberately watches up the food to get even with the males in the house, which I think is a great thing. Which, like Prasadi referred to her mother not telling people what she was putting in mouth-watering delicacies. There is the other one. You fix somebody's happiness, deny him the pleasure of eating well, and that's it. That's your revenge. So I'll stop here. And I think if some of these things we can take up, either the breaking down of taboos or breaking down of barriers, caste, community, class, social class, regionalism, etc., which I think is terrible for India at the moment.
Thank you so much, Professor Pant. And I think we will take a lot of from your opening remarks in the conversation. But I will now be MOOC audience, and I'll hand over the entire proceeding to Sadaf Bhai, but I might ask a question or two in between. But Sadaf Bhai, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Panta. Thank you, Prasadi, William, and Blasa. I think he has left already.
Lisa ma'am, you are on mute, I think. And Ranvi, Chef Barar, I think, is under the weather, so he had to leave.
Yes.
May I add a little bit here?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry if I take up a little time, because what I wanted to also say, but I knew we were running out of time, is that happened then. And the topic is impact of partition. So that happened then. But what is happening now is very heartening, because you said it about regional cuisine coming back. Is very heartening because of 2 generations after partition growing up here and not being that affected. Our grandparents were, our parents were, but not the generations after me, not being affected, and of intermarriages happening. Appreciation of each other's food has now started happening. And that has led to this search for roots. And in Bengal today, there's a resurgence of Bengal cuisine. Now we are putting it out very proudly. Now West Bengal is seeing the entire repertoire and appreciating. And I find that really heartening, because new cuisines are now, old cuisines that have become new today are now finally coming up, and people are making a real effort to document it and to put it out. So I see great hope now in this, what is happening today.
Thank you, Prasadi. I think a couple of days back, Anuti Vishal also wrote an article on similar, well, her take was different, but she also mentioned about, so on the same lines, that how we are essentially documenting all these local, hyper-local cuisine. I think pandemic in a way also helped a lot for people to document it. 2 things I think Pansab mentioned about potato and goat, that aloo Hindu ho gaya or bakra Musliman ho gaya, और I think दोनों जाके लखनऊ में मिल गए, तो वहाँ आलू गोश्त हो गया और गंगा जमुनी तहजीब जिसको बोलते हैं वहाँ जाके वो साथ में आ गया. And second is what Maria mentioned about Sindhi food. I think it's the same here in India as well. I am not too sure if, how many people are actually documented Sindhi food. It's still something which people are still exploring. There are a bunch of people I know. There's, of course, Chef Vicky Ratnani, there's Sanjha Chulha, and there's another friend of mine called Jyoti. So all of them are doing something or other, but I think there's a lot more to do. What now I wanted to visit, there are a lot of questions on YouTube as well. One of our common mutual known friend, Rocky Mohan, is also there. He's also commenting on the video. I wanted to understand one thing from all of you actually, that how when partition happened, right? We know that in a way food is similar. I couldn't go to Pakistan as yet, but I was in Bangladesh. Uh, I realized the food is same. There's nothing much changed. But I wanted to understand
No,
is the evolution itself, right?
no.
Say what
Bangladeshi
again?
food is not the same. There's a history to it. If you
No,
will
no.
allow me time,
Yes,
it's not the same.
yeah, that's where I'll come to. Is when partition happened, when each of these now new nations, so to speak, right, all the new countries, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, all got their own versions of, in a way, name-wise at least similar food. So that's what I want to understand, is how that has changed, and what you're mentioning, Kitadi, is that it's not. So that's
No,
what I
so
want to
I'll tell
understand.
you.
So I'll go with actually
I'll
you only,
tell you
Kitadi.
why.
And,
Yeah, I'll tell you why. Because when East Bengal opted to become East Pakistan, there was a push to uh, associate themselves and align themselves with the West Pakistanis. How best again to express that? Through food, through the Islamization of food. So therefore, the kormas and the kalyas and foods like that became much more important than the ghontos and the chochuris and the usual Bengali foods that you hear about. The styles of cooking in East Bengal were different, but the dishes were similar. So that took precedence, and we saw the Islamization of food. But post-liberation, where that confusion, there was a fragmentation, and there was this confusion of what am I? Am I a Bengali first, or am I a Muslim first? And the Bengaliness, the Bengaliyat or Bangaliana as we call it, took over, and they wanted an independent nation to be Bengalis. And so what happened then? The President Ziaur Rahman, he amended the constitution to say that the Bengalis of Bangladesh, it said something like that. I'm not quoting verbatim, I don't remember, that the Bengalis of Bangladesh are different from the Bengalis of India. Now, how do you differentiate that? Again, through food. So from the pulaus and all of that, with the Bihari migrants, Bangladesh had very delicate pulaus, and we've always seen in our homes there was no biryani ever made. It was all pulaus. So the pulaus slowly started transforming, and with the Bihari refugees displaced from India going into Bangladesh, they started all the biryanis that we hear of today in Bangladesh. They popularized it. And slowly, as this entire movement for Bangaliana grew, and they still wanted to be different from the Bengalis in India, they started going back to their agrarian roots. And what came up now? What is Bangladesh's national dish? It's the panta bhat, the kanji, the fermented rice kanji. It's the panta bhat. And if they want to lay out a Bangladeshi spread, it is bhartas. The old mashes that we used to have, which required less fuel, less oil, and because it was a country that also went through a lot of exploitation, turmoil, natural disasters, so we still have those at home. We have boiled and mashed, had with a little mustard oil, or just roasted and had with a little mustard oil. So now they started making bhattas out of everything, and it moved from the simple, humble home to fine dining tables. So the bharta and the panta bhat, the fermented rice gruel, has become the national dish of Bangladesh and what we call Bangladeshi food today. So it's Bengal in India and Bangladesh and Bangladeshi food. So they are two separate. It is not the same food anymore. That is also another impact of what politics can do.
As we know about Panta Bhat already, MasterChef Australia, this one
Yes,
lady cooks
she
Panta
put
Bhat
it
and
out.
that became.
She put it
Yeah.
out.
There's one follow-up question for you, Prithaji, and then we'll go to Pansab and Mariam as well. On YouTube channel, there's one question by Samir Khan, and he's talking about Bangladeshi food, and he asks, doesn't modern Bangladeshi food have far more in common with North Indian food than the West Bengal cuisine?
North Indian food. Not really, not really. The dishes are the same. The similarity, the difference is that they use a lot more onion and garlic and everything, which West Bengal, most of our vegetarian or even our fish preparations don't use so much onion or garlic. Sometimes there is no onion garlic at all, even in fish preparations. And they use a lot more onion, garlic and masalas, and they use a lot of roasted jeera, which I see as a direct influence from Pakistani cuisine. Roasted jeera is, used very much in Bangladeshi cuisine. It's just the balance of masalas. It is not really like North Indian cuisine.
That's good to know. I hope that answered some question. Pansab, हिंदुस्तानी खाना किस तरीके से उधर से इधर जब सामान आया है फिर जो I think you touched upon a little bit in your opening remarks about how Delhi food has changed, but more detail maybe.
नहीं, मेरे ख्याल में मैं माफी चाहूंगा पहले before I answer your question directly. I would like to go back to what Prasadi was talking about. I think if Bangladesh calls its national dish a panta bhat, let's not forget that Odias will come to fisticuffs on this one with Rasgulla as well, because they have something called pakar. And the pakar is exactly the same. In Jharkhand,
we also have a panta bhat.
In Jharkhand, you have a pani bhat. In Assam, you have a poita bhat. And you have the whole banquet served around the pakar. You have a bhaja, you have a chutney, you have a bodi, you have a pickle. So I think, the affinities in the subcontinental food go beyond affinities shared by linguistic states or ethnically sharing culture. The borders are very blurred all along. So you have this very much there. I think
it goes back to common agrarian roots that we all had.
And one other thing which I wanted to add, which in my haste, in excitement, forgot in the beginning, Bengal has had the experience before partition of a devastating famine, which impacted on food much more, and the influx of refugees from now Bangladesh, East Bengal, then to West Bengal, which had an impact that Bhuka Nanga Bengali was a phrase used by Hindi-speaking people for the famine-stricken people, not the refugees. So the man-made famine of 1943, which for some odd reasons is called the Great Famine, it was the most disgraceful famine, had impacted on the Bengali food much before that. These two apart. Now, I would also dispute a category of something called Hindustani food. Now, ever since there is this haste to get the intangible heritage of mankind list in inclusion. So there is this great debate about what should India get. So immediately they said we would have a khichdi as our national dish because the present prime minister loves it, eats it. It comes from Gujarat and it is cooked in one form or the other in all parts of the country. The bhuni khichdi in Bengal, kejri in Anglo-India, pongal is a kind of a khichdi in Tamil Nadu and southern states. You also have a sweet version of that, you might say. You have Makar Sankranti ritual khichdi of black marsh. But the point is, you still would find which khichdi is the authentic Indian khichdi. So that's why I had mentioned the Indian national anthem, which talks in terms of fragmentation of the idea of India in the mind, and then you try to superimpose a Hindustani खाना. तो जैसे मुझे थोड़ा झगड़ने का मन आपसे हो रहा है इस वक्त कि जब आपने कहा कि आलू और बकरा मिल गए और आलू गोश्त लखनऊ में बन गया, तो ये तो दिल्ली में भी बनता था, मगर
बंगाल में तो हर टाइम
बंगाल में भी बनता था.
आलू के बिना कुछ भी नहीं होता बंगाल में.
दिक्कत क्या है कि ये आलू के संग चक्कर ये है कि अगर आलू गोश्त में खाने जा रहा हूं तो कौन हिंदू की ओन्ड ईटरी आलू गोश्त बेच रही है, और अगर मैं करीम में जा रहा हूं तो झगड़ा शुरू हो रहा है वो झटके वाला बकरा था कि हलाल वाला बकरा था. Now these things had died down. We had gotten more mature. My second problem is with the formulation of the Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb. Ganga Jamna are two rivers in the north, and it is just accidental that Allama Iqbal wrote, "Oh, yahan pe road Ganga hoga to yaar tujhko utra jab tere kinare wa karwa hamara," etc. And Nehru was fond of Ganga Jamna because he was born and brought up maybe elsewhere, but lived most of his life in Allahabad and elsewhere. I think the synthesis between Islamic culture, architecture did not actually take place in the Mughal India. I think the Asli confluence of the Indic, Hindu, Buddhist, and other civilizations, Aryan and Dravidian, took place before the Mughals in Quli Qutub Shah's domain, in Hyderabad, in the fragmentations of the Bahmani Sultanates. We tend to forget that. We tend to forget the Turco-Persian influences. We tend to forget Abyssinian influences here. We tend to forget that the great not the melting pot, but whatever is the equivalent of a confluence, took place in southern India. And when the Arabs brought Islam in peace, they became the sons-in-law in Kerala called the Mapilas, which is the origin of the word Mopla Muslims. So we tend to forget that soon after the birth of Christ, the apostle had landed here. So the Greek Orthodox Church might be claimed to be older, but Marthoma sects and the Syrian Christians in Kerala date back to the 1st century of the Common Era. We forget about the Jews there. We forget. So we tend to forget that this Ganga Jamni is a convenient phrase, but this country has been having this kind of a synthesis and syncretism and celebration of diversity and retaining a separate identity. So I'm not too keen on developing a Hindustani cuisine. I would much rather have different streams of Indian cuisines, none of which claims primacy or can claim to be mainstream. So there are like tributaries of a river. Long years ago, I worked on a book on dhabas along the GT road. I think it was a fascinating experience that you leave the GT road, you take a by lane, and the person would insist that asli GT road to yahi hai. I mean, Mariam referred to her grandmother from Aligarh. Now, Aligarh doesn't actually fall on the GT road, but when you take a detour of the Great Cord, end up in Aligarh, is a great center of Islamic learning, modernity. But now we tend to say, because the name says Aligarh Muslim University, it is a hotbed of Muslim conspiracies. You have a Banaras Hindu University, so that university should be the revivalist. It should only inherit those elements of its past which reinforce the Hindu orthodoxy. You have Jamia Millia Islamia, which was in Delhi, now ranked among the top universities in the country. So unfortunately, the present day overtones and undertones of communal politics and the politics of food in contemporary India, prescriptions and prohibitions and taboos, unfortunately, is impinging on what Prasadi was very happy about, is the optimism about what is happening in the younger generation. I think people like Mariam's generation, I think, are the greatest hope for understanding, empathy, and a dialogue which can take place, which doesn't have to follow the track 2, track 3, Nimrana or the Raisina dialogues. I mean, you follow the journey of taste and you say, but what strikes me, I was reading Anchal Malhotra's The Language of Remembrance. Now, the women who are remembering partition, Anchal Malhotra makes exactly the same point. The parents and grandparents did not talk about partition because the memories were very unpleasant. They erased them. Now, but they are gone. The grandparents are gone. Parents have been busy putting their roots again in an alien land. And the children have no first-hand experience. I mean, I don't have an experience of partition or uprooting, but I do remember that even almost 800 kilometers removed from the border, there was a looking down on, I remember there was a Sardar family called Sardar Rabel Singh who set up a small cloth shop and said, oh, ye to refugee hai. And you know, they have lost everything. Everybody thought that they were intruders and they were not happily welcomed, even if they belong to the same religion and so on. But my concern has always been, what about, quote unquote, those minorities, especially the Muslims who stayed back in India, ate what they wanted to eat till very recently. And they had memories of living in this country. And India was one of the largest, after Indonesia, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, the largest concentration of Muslims in the world, and the second largest after Iran of Shia Muslims. So I don't know, this Hindustani cuisine is a shortcut to say something that we have plastered over. We have done the Band-Aid treatment to very serious fault lines.
Thank you, Patta. That was, that was sort of clarifying my doubts, clarifying those terminology. Majid?
So Sadaf, sorry, so your question was around how did the food change from, going back to your original question.
Changed or evolved, and
like
what has...
differences between Eastern and Western would like would
Your voice is breaking
sorry,
at least
my
from.
connection's maybe I can off. Sorry, and I'll just go ahead and hopefully that was able to say.
Okay, join back.
Repeat your question again.
I was saying that same question, but the evolution of the Pakistan cuisine, or what became a Pakistan cuisine, what was undivided Punjab cuisine. So how did you see that? What Kisam Reddy or Pansaba? Are you there?
No, I
She's
think
frozen.
So
yeah,
I think
not
so
good.
it's what I mentioned in my opening remarks. Sorry,
Mariam,
hear me now?
we can't hear you, Mariam.
Can you hear me okay? Okay, let me play around this.
I was saying that there's lots of questions on our YouTube channel, but Ishan has one question. Ishan?
Yeah, so because we were talking about, we are currently talking about the colony that was, entire Indian subcontinent, the colony, but partition also created an impact on the empire. There were ripples of partition that were seen in, say, London. And there was an article by Jonathan Nunn called "Blurred Lines" because Professor Pan mentioned blurred lines in his opening remarks. So that reminded me that he argues for an idea of a second London, a place where the immigrants were, immigrant histories are centered over imperial victories. So my question is, how do you see, because Kavita Puri, who is an oral historian, also mentions how Indians and Pakistanis, or Indians on both sides before partition, decided to go to the UK rather than joining either of the countries, and what did that lead to the Indian food or the concept of Indian food in London? How did the curry change after partition? That's my question about the empire, not the colony.
Ishan, if you let me interrupt you right here, I think this is a question which is a fake question, which is like this: that how many people out of hundreds of millions of Indians had the choice and resources to move at the time of partition to set up a nice chilling home in London in a Tony area. This has happened to people, fugitives from law like Vijay Mallya, to Lalit Modi, to Niravs, and the rest in recent past. Now, I don't think that we should have this much of an advantage of hindsight and say people had decided to have a little London there. The people who wanted food were the ones who suddenly found that they were not the Gora Sahibs and the Bada Lat Sahibs in India. They had been reduced to minor colonial functionaries, a fate which Mr. Patton, Lord Patton, now underwent after Hong Kong's governorship. So I think even Lord Mountbatten, when he went back to England, was not the same glory as the Viceroy in India. So I think the people who went back to England had a nostalgia about the Raj and food in India. So they tried to retain some version of a curry. Now, I think the curry itself is a great assault on Indian culinary tradition, because curry derived from the curry, and the curry, whether it's the meat curry, fish curry, chicken curry, anda curry, all curries violate the nuances of a korma, salan, do pyaza, korma, etc. What contributed towards the food? You go back to Tandoori Nights, you go back to Veerasami's restaurant, you go back to Chutney Mary. You have a whole lot of Indian food restaurants trying to position themselves as equal to other ethnic restaurants in London and do good business. Not very many in very recent years managed to even get a Michelin star or get recognition. They were supposed to be cheaper food. There was the food which was enjoyed by people who were the hooligan football lovers in England, who would say that they are more than toxic masculinity, could take the Indian chilies, guzzle down beer, and do the rakas and get out. So the subtlety of Indian food, the high quality Indian food, and there again, when you say the food from some subcontinent, you take Tandoori Nights. The cooks were either from Bangladesh, or they were from Sri Lanka, or they were from West Indies. So there was their interpretations of the diasporic food which took place in London. So I don't think that the future of Indian food is going to be decided by how many Michelin stars these restaurants get in either Bay Area, San Francisco, or in London, or Dubai, or Bangkok, or elsewhere. So I think when we talk in terms of the subcontinent, we should probably stay focused sharply on subcontinent.
No, we ask these questions to bring out this amazing color of Pushpesh Sahab every time we have a conversation with him. But because I think Mariam's connection is back again. So Mariam, the first question by Sadaf was, how did food change after partition? Or and my question was, what happened to curry after partition in London, the empire?
Your question has been discarded. You don't. That question's out.
We have that moderator's privilege. Even if our question is a false question, we still kind of ask that question.
No, absolutely. I'm happy to take a stab at both. So I think regarding Sadaf's first question, it's what I mentioned was that I think post-partition, there was this big push, which was like kind of like this Muslim Urdu speaking identity. I think was really narrowly focused. And I think that in terms of the promotion of Pakistani cuisine or what national dishes of were centered around people who migrated from India, right? So it was either Punjabi focused or focused on sort of the wealthier Urdu speaking elites. And like I said, it created what was already what we're seeing is the subsequent marginalization of the other ethnic groups, so the other provinces, other linguistic communities. And I think that's problematic. And I think that because now, as we've sort of brought this up, that there's been like this greater interest all globally just in regional Indian cuisine. You're actually even seeing this in the diaspora as well. I think that hopefully the conversation can begin to shift, at least in the civil society space. I don't know if it's when the government's going to start taking note of it, but so I think that I agree that we sort of need to move away from this notion of what national cuisine is. So that's one part. In terms of the subtle changes, I did want to talk about this because it's something that I've been wondering a lot. My Pakistani friends and I talk a lot about this. Just in terms of cooking techniques, I do think that there's really niche, subtle differences between how we prepare food in Pakistani Punjab and in Eastern Punjab. And they're very minor. It has to do with the balance of masalas, the sequencing. I think Pakistanis take a little bit more shortcuts. There's like a slightly sharper profile. It's very tomato heavy. And I'd be curious to hear the group's feedback on it. I'm not really sure why that is, but I feel like Pakistani Punjabis love to add tomatoes to everything. So there's just this kind of like huge emphasis. And when I talk to people from India who make similar food to it, they're just like, you use the same 4 spices and everything. Why is there tomatoes and everything? So there's weird, like subtle shifts that I've started to see. And I'd be curious. I don't have any answers yet, but I think that's definitely one part. I know my family particularly makes food in a specific way because my nani was the mother of 8 children with no help. So she was doing a lot of shortcuts. So then there's a lot of people who will like read my recipes and be like, well, you're doing this wrong and doing this wrong. And I was like, she was cooking for a family of 8. And so our family recipes evolved to take into account the fact that she was a really overburdened, 17-year-old young mother who's just doing her best. So she was going to like do a lot of like little shortcuts, and that sort of is carried on into my mother's cooking and now my cooking as well. So so I think that there's some interesting shifts that could happen because you may be working with very little resources when you sort of move as a refugee. And so you're not going to sort of have that kind of like culinary, like that sort of integrity, I guess, if you want to call it. In terms of the diaspora, I will push back. I think that I don't know. I think just in terms of the evolution of curry, because I sort of straddle both worlds between South Asian food media as well as American food media, and curry is like a huge. There's a lot of conversation around it, and I think that particularly South Asians in the United States get very triggered by the word curry because they feel it erases it. But at the same time, it's as a recipe developer, I find it a useful classifier. But just in terms of sort of yeah, I think that there's some thoughts, because specifically with Pakistani food, a lot of Pakistani restaurants who are, curry houses, they label themselves as Indian restaurants because they feel that's what's going to sell. And again, in terms of what's going to sell is again a very narrow section of cuisine, which is just a very flattened version of what Indian food is supposed to look like, and so I don't know. I think it's interesting in terms of like food in the empire, and I'm counting the United States in it. I do think that it's there is just general like I think it's an economic decision. I think that I think it was primarily economic. It's become something else now, as those communities have sort of gained sort of moved up the economic and social ladder. But it started off as just that was the one skill they had, and I found this a little bit with Cambodians as well. I lived in Cambodia prior to this. A lot of Cambodian refugees, they just opened up Chinese restaurants because Chinese food sells. Similarly, with Bangladeshi and Pakistani cooks, they're not going to sell food that's labeled as Bangladeshi and Pakistan. They'll sell Indian food and also North Indian food because that's what sells. And I think that that's kind of, just, I guess, I don't know if this answers your question, but that's sort of my take on it. I think it's an interesting sort of separate stream of South Asian food.
Yeah, but before we'll move to YouTube comments and questions. But before that, any of our panelists have any question for each other, we'll give time for that now. So Pushpesh Saab, Preetha ma'am, Mariam, if you have questions.
I have again something to add because
Yeah.
thoughts keep coming up.
Yeah.
In your brief to us, you had mentioned recipes that are lost. Now, I firmly believe nothing is lost. If it was lost, then how could people everywhere doing festivals of lost recipes? Then where are they finding it? So, but what becomes inaccessible? Then slowly starts fading from people's memories, but somewhere someone is still doing it. So one such thing that, while in my research and while, traveling through interiors of Bengal and all of that, I found that one thing that nobody does know, people think that it's only the people in the Northeast who eat bamboo shoot. Now that wasn't true. In East Bengal, bamboo grew in profusion. So one thing that after partition, the Bengalis from that side lost was the cooking with bamboo and with bamboo shoot and cooking in bamboo tubes. There was something called the sunga pitha. Sunga pitha coming from the word chonga. The chonga, the cylindrical tube. The sunga pitha, rice flour, etc. would be stuffed in it, or meats, and then cooked in the bamboo. And so, these kinds of things where the produce wasn't available, those kinds of foods started losing out. And because of inaccessibility. And slowly, but then again, I said there's been a resurgence. And many other people have also joined me in my quest to, bring back. And because, we've technology and modern refrigeration, all this has happened. Now, these things have started coming into West Bengal markets and, modern ways of freightage and of preservation markets, and people are once again reviving these things. So it's a lot of foods because of post-partition, because of not being accessible to us, that slowly started fading away. And so it became only Assamese food or only Northeast food. The Bengalis from East Bengal lost out on a large part of their repertoire, and it became somebody else's food.
Yeah, I think I agree especially with the bamboo shoot. Growing up in Bihar, Jharkhand space, at least, I grew up there. And it's really nice when you said that if it's lost, then how are people doing festivals?
Everybody is doing festivals of lost recipes.
Yes, that is true. So yeah, lost until it's found. The other thing before we go to YouTube as well is Mariam's question on the tomato thing. I remember I was in Lucknow and speaking with late Farooq Jafar, and also there's a book by Mir Jafar on Lucknow cookbook, and it talks about how it's demeaning to use tomato in korma, and korma should only be made with dahi. And how late Farooq Jafar was mentioning this, and she said that पार्टीशन के बाद सब कुछ खत्म हो गया, बिल्कुल ऐसे लोग आके हर चीज में टमाटर डाल रहे हैं, इनको तो खाने की तमीज ही नहीं है. That was very strong thing that she mentioned. I think in the modern times, many individuals actually use tomato to make korma. I don't agree with it. I think, you know, I won't agree because I like dahi's flavor better than tomato. Not necessarily because I have this high-headed nahi tomato का इस्तेमाल कैसे कर सकते हैं. I personally don't like tomato flavor in korma. I don't know if Pansahab would agree or disagree on this. Pansahab, would you?
नहीं, मुझे लगता है संध्या भाई इसमें टमाटर के संग जो है वो रिश्ता 36 का सबका होता है, क्योंकि दिक्कत ये है कि टमाटर पहले मौसमी सब्जी थी जिसमें जायका होता था. जब से कोल्ड स्टोरेज है और ये हाइब्रिड टमाटर आया है जो देसी टमाटर नहीं है, विच स्लाइसेस बेटर फॉर हैमबर्गर्स एंड सलाड्स एंड सो ऑन, तो आप उसको इस्तेमाल करते हैं और वो सबकी उसकी खटास भी सब पर चढ़ जाती है और उसका रंग भी सबको खराब कर देता है. तो मेरे ख्याल में इतना तो मैं स्ट्रॉन्ग नहीं कहूंगा कि खाने की तमीज नहीं है, मगर मेरे ख्याल में टमाटर से अगर हाथ खींचा जा सके तो बेहतर है, क्योंकि टमाटर में वो मजा है नहीं जो दही में है, या जो सुर्ख लाल मिर्च में है, या पीली मिर्च में है, या हल्दी में है, या धनिए की हरियाली है, वो सब मर जाती है टमाटर.
ये तो है. अब आते हैं YouTube पे, काफी सारे लोगों ने सवाल जवाब कर रखा है. एक सवाल था नूरी मीरा का, जिन्होंने डिलीट कर दिया है, तो वो गायब हो चुकी है. सबसे पहले ऊपर भी है सवाल, सबके लिए है एक एक कुछ सवाल. पहले हम
एक सवाल मुझे दिख रहा है, it's somebody called HR.
हिमेश पेशनिया.
I think it's more like a comment than a question, but Partition gave birth to a unique cuisine in refugee camps. Basically, the combination of cuisine refugees brought with them and local cuisine, that is, for example, fish koli vada, combination of frontier cuisine and Konkani. And then he says that GTB Nagar area of Mumbai was formerly called Punjabi refugee camp, where many Hindko speaking refugees from NWFP were settled post partition, famous for its frontier cuisine like paya at Sardar Paya. So any comments on this refugee cuisine that developed post partition in the refugee camps, food that developed in refugee camps?
Yes. In Bengal, we had this unique dish brought in by the Punjabis who settled post partition, called chicken bharta. It was not available anywhere else in India. It was a Calcutta specialty, basically. And they set up dhabas and introduced something called the chicken bharta. It was basically leftover tandoori chicken, and it was shredded. And because it was shredded, a little went a long way. So food was scarce then, and they could not afford to waste anything. So for a typical common man, one bowl of chicken bharta was enough for 4. And with 4 naans, it went a very long way. And it became one of the most popular dishes of Punjabi food in Bengal, chicken bharta. A little bit of boiled egg would be scattered on it, and it looked exotic. And so it did give rise to certain very interesting dishes.
Yeah. I always say that tandoori chicken became chicken butter masala, and then that became chicken bharta.
Chicken bharta.
नहीं, जो वो बटर मसाला बनने के पहले भरता बन गया. देखिए उसमें दिक्कत ये थी कि जिस टमाटर से आपको इतराज है उससे बंगाली भी थोड़ा घबरा रहे थे.
हाँ.
तो टमाटर दिल्ली में पंजाबियत के साथ आया था, उससे वो बचा खुचा जो तंदूरी चिकन था वो ग्रेवी में चला गया और वो बटर चिकन बन गया. मगर वो बटर चिकन मसाला पहले नहीं बना, वो टिक्का मसाला तो विलायत में जाके बना. और उसमें जो तब बात छूट गई थी, मैं चाहे ये जोड़ना चाहूंगा, अंग्रेज वहां पहुंचने वाले विलायत में, they were some of them were double refugees who went from India as indentured labor to East Africa, and then after Idi Amin's atrocities went from Africa, East Africa to England or to America, the Patels, and so on. So I think the problem is that this double refuge, the diasporic dispersants are different. मुझे थोड़ा ये भी अटपटा लग रहा है, the gentleman who's raised the issue about fish koli vada. तो कोलीज तो फिश खाते थे, उनकी जो फिश थी वो कोंकणी मालवानी मसाले की पहले से थी, उसमें नॉर्थ वेस्ट फ्रंटियर का तो कहाँ पे है, वो तो मुझे कहीं नजर ही नहीं आता फिश कोलीवाड़ा में. Pritha ji would like to maybe comment on this one, because she travels more than I do and she tastes more.
I have forgotten the name of the chef, but it was some chef in not so very far away times who invented this dish. I mean, who created this dish.
Absolutely.
I have not heard about this thing of Northwest Frontier, and it is basically a Malwani masala kind of a fish that he named fish kolivara. He had made something, innovated with it. Could be he had put in some kind of Northwest Frontier influence. I'm not aware of that.
The other question is, somebody's asked, to my understanding, partition brought in new cuisines to every side of the border. But during that process, did we as subcontinent lose on any hyper-local cuisine which aren't talked about today? I think we can go across, maybe we can start with Madan. Because you keep documenting and you also keep traveling while traveling and staying in different countries as well.
So, I mean, I think we've talked about this at length during the opening sessions about that there has been a loss in terms of, I think, my focus a lot was that when we keep trying to reinforce a specific identity, I think that it sort of comes at the expense of other smaller cuisines. I think the issue of accessibility, I think is Preetha's point is extremely valid. I think we've just in terms of how kind of agriculture is evolving. I think that I don't know if it's really partition related, but I think it's just I would call it more post partition, just as your way farming is developed and there's a certain crops that are just sort of being aggressively distributed. I think that it's coming at the expense of more like it's sort of coming at the expense of these much more localized dishes that use very like specific ingredients. I think that I don't know if it was specifically related to partition, but yeah, I do think that post partition we're definitely seeing like kind of like this what do you call it? I'm losing the word, the homogenization of cuisine, but I think it's more to do with it sort of which ingredients make it to markets and which don't. Yeah, and
in Bengal, I agree with Maria. In Bengal, say because of the last Nawab of Awadh having moved to Calcutta, and so now any Muslim food, it's taken for granted that we've got it from Avdi cuisine. And so what is ignored is the original Bengali Muslim cuisine in Bengal, in India. The Bengali Muslim cuisine is ignored. The Bengali Christian cuisine is ignored. So what you were talking about, regional communities, they are being left out in the process. So when we talk about Muslim food in Bengal, everybody says Nawab of Awadh, forgetting that the Turks, Afghans, Mughals were all there before Nawab of Awadh came in 1856. But before that, so there was a thriving Bengali, and the Bengal has this thing of making everything its own. And so a thriving Bengali Muslim gastronomy happening in Bengal, which has totally gotten lost. In the sense, I'm using the word lost, yes, but it's there because I did research. I had a few people on this entire food festival that I had done. I had this particular lady who cooked the most wonderful Bengali Muslim cuisine and dishes that you don't hear of otherwise because everything's swamped by this Awadhi wave. Then I have friends who have Afghan lineage, Pathans, settled in Murshidabad. They have their own kind of food. You see? So so we have kind of totally ignored. Now, slowly, I hope, with this entire rejuvenation thing happening, these things come to the fore.
There are two questions which is very interesting. One is open for all, one is specifically to Pansab. And the question, first open question, is interesting because I love desserts. So Diljit Singh has asked that how the partition and resulting movement of different groups affected the dessert scene in different cuisine. Uh, Now, of course, this part of the world, it's all about Bengali cuisine. Few of my friends who live across the border in Karachi and Islamabad as well, they mentioned about, again, Bengali cuisine, Bengali dessert there. But how has it changed? Is it only Bengali desserts everywhere, or is there something beyond as well, like halwa, for example? Not halwa. Halwa is the most common
नहीं
one.
नहीं देखिए इसमें again the confusion is there that in Indian eating there is no such thing as a dessert course. हमारे यहाँ बिस्मिल्लाह कह के पहले मुंह मीठा करते थे, वो मोहम्मद बिन तुगलक के जमाने से भी, और उसके बाद अलबरूनी कहिए, इब्न बतूता कहिए, सब लोग ये कहते तब हम मीठा खा के खाना करते थे शुरू, और संग में हम खाते रहते थे. हमारे यहाँ मिठाई खाने का रिवाज है. हम हलवाई की दुकान पे जाते हैं, जलेबी, इमरती, रबड़ी, लड्डू, पेड़े, परवल सब खाते रहते हैं. जब बंगाली पार्टीशन के बहुत पहले दिल्ली में राजधानी, when the imperial capital was shifted from Calcutta to Delhi, some Bengalis came and settled here and opened an Annapurna Mishran Bhandar. Now there is a direct.
But that is very interesting, sir.
Yes.
The family that came to Delhi and opened Annapurna came from Lahore. Bengali
Absolutely.
family from Lahore.
No, but precisely the problem is Bengal had an old connection with Lahore.
Yes.
The Kabuliwala and Tagore and all that story and the journey of Tappa from Lahore. You know, all enterprising Bengali teachers, musicians, artists, Bhavesh Sanyal, they had their base in Lahore. So Lahore was part of India. So Calcutta, if somebody wanted to make money or seek a better future, he would end up in Lahore. So Lahore would, these things would come. No, but the delicate point I'm trying to make is that once the Bengali sweets were available to Indians, the delicate chena sweets became more popular than the grain-based sweets of North India before the Bengalis had conquered the palates about the sweets. So, you know, where is a rasgulla, cham-cham, pantua, lady kenny, all those things were different. So they evolved a little, but I don't think the partition made a difference. The partition has only one history of the name changing. When the Karachi halwa came, and there were some very patriotic Indians who thought that Karachi halwa should not be eaten as Karachi halwa, so they called it the Sindhi halwa. They called it the Bombay halwa. And this is what the Chenamal shop, Sindhi shop, who had come to India around the partition time, but they were not refugees. They had been like, they had read the weather vane right. They came to Delhi before they had lost all, and they had high-grade sweets in Delhi. But it is not a dessert. अगर आप dessert खाने के बाद restaurant में जा रहे हैं, so they force you a dessert on you. कि खीर खा लीजिए, फिरनी खा लीजिए, कुल्फी खा लीजिए. Because no Indian is prepared to have a cheese and crackers platter or the fruit platter, cut fruit platter. तो अब हम मार के dessert कर रहे हैं. I don't think that partition changed the dessert scene at all.
But I think he meant the dessert mithai only, so we'll go
जी.
to the word mithai.
नहीं तो उस पर भी अगर आप ध्यान दीजिए तो पार्टीशन के बाद कौन सी मिठाई हिंदुस्तान में आई? घेवर तो पहले बन रहा था, कराची हलवा बहुत पहले से बन रहा था, सिंधी हलवा, निशाश्ता गेहूं का हलवा, साउथ में गोदूम हलवा, हलवे अरबों के संग आ गए थे, हबशी हलवा और मतलब दूसरे हलवे आप कर दीजिए जितने आप चाहें, बादाम का हलवा कह लीजिए, केसरी भात आप कर लीजिए, गोश्त का हलवा कह लीजिए आप, तो वो तो पार्टीशन के पहले से बन रहा था.
Yes. No, I mean, I think that it is very interesting for me to hear the other side of the border. I think Pakistan ke jo meethe ke wale, I think there was a shift. I don't think it was solely Bengali, but like I mentioned, all the Muhajir from migrants, particularly Urdu speaking migrants, came from a lot of different states in India to Pakistan. So unke saath they brought their own types of sweets. Unfortunately, I grew up in a city where there wasn't that much variety, but aap Karachi jayenge to there's a lot more than Bengali type sweets. And these are very again, just each are very specific to their community. So there's definitely was I think Karachi, for example, has a much livelier meetha scene than other parts of Pakistan. But that was just because of the particular migrant makeup. So sorry, I don't have any names and stuff, but this is just sort of my broad understanding.
Yeah. Preeta ma'am, any comments?
Are there any more questions?
The same thing about the mitha.
Yes, I have something to say. I feel very proud that Bengali sweets have gone all over. But the flip side is that the tradition of sweets with grains that Bengal had has completely gone out of style. except for certain festival days when some homes make it. But more or less, they are falling into disuse. We also had a very rich tradition of sweets made with various grains and rice flour and khoya and coconut. A lot of coconut was used. All that is slowly it's taken a backseat totally. And you don't get that easily anymore.
Sadhbhai, should I take over? Because we are out of time now. It's 1 hour 30 minutes already. So
we have one more question directly for Pansab, and then you can take over.
Achha, sure.
So the question to Pansab is by Ayush. He's asking, would you consider that momos are now a part of Delhi cuisine? Aren't the different historical experiences post-independence equally important in defining modern cuisine?
नहीं, ये मेरे ख्याल में बहुत ब्रिलियंट सवाल है. मुझे लगता है पार्टीशन से कहीं ज्यादा जो रिफ्यूजी एक्सोडस पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस अदर देन पाकिस्तान और बंगाल हिंदू दिल्ली में हुआ है और जगह हुआ है, उसने खाने को बहुत इफेक्ट किया है. Post 1962 or even maybe before that, the deterioration in Sino-Indian relationships resulted in an influx of Tibetan refugees. And the Majnu Ka Dhaba in Delhi, which was called Tib Dabs in mid-60s, was a great place for charas and chang and momos and chow mein and so on. Now, but these are not alien foods coming, because if you see that Ladakh and if you see Sikkim, if you see Nepal is not part of India, but that's why I had mentioned fuzzy frontiers and blurred borders, food has been traveling. So like samosa, momo also is very much a part of the mainstream Indian cuisine. बड़ा गरीब परवर खाना है, 30-35 रुपए में 6-7 आ जाते हैं. And if you are not fussy about finding out कि meat कौन सा भरा है, तो whether it is a buff or chicken or crow, you don't worry about that. It fills the belly. It needs very little fuel. अगर health conscious है तो कहीं steam करके खा लिया था. तो वो मेरे ख्याल में momo is very much there, and momo has displaced the kebabs, traditional kebabs of Delhi, much to my regret. But who am I when the people are voting with their palate? You have a tandoori momo. You have a tandoori momo now. So which is, I think, as close as you come to evolution of food post-independence India. It's just one example. You could have Lithi Chokha's appearance. You would have Hilsa boneless chokha being filled in a madwa puri, like Puja Sahu's pot belly. So there are interesting things happening.
Thank you so much, Professor Pant, for that answer. But before concluding, Professor Pant mentioned an important point in his opening remark, that was the politics of food and how politics influence food. Where he mentioned that you could be lynched for eating, any kind of meat, and it would be called beef or in India because of the hyper-national tones. But my final question to all three of you is, how do you think politics influence food, especially during the partition or just after partition in newly made East Pakistan and West Pakistan?
How many questions are you trying to pack into one, Ishan? First of all, I would like to know that.
A lot.
Because no, to answer your question sensibly is impossible keeping the time constraint in mind. So I have another session for this. I think food involves politics integrally, because man cannot live without food. And it is not the taste, delicacies or recipes. It is a question of business of food. So if you take the war in Ukraine at the moment, the temporary mediation of Turkey with Putin is because can you get the grain out of Ukraine? So food and politics are impossibly mixed up. You can't separate them at all.
I'll tell you how politics impacts. It is a very recent story. Very, one of the leading national newspapers refused a story from me because I was talking about indigenous sausages. It was about meat and pork, and beef. So the story was that, the sausages that communities in India make. And they said, very sorry, but given the, climate now, we don't think we can carry this article. So that's how politics affects food.
Yeah, thank you, Preetha ma'am, for that wonderful anecdote. I think, well, not wonderful, but an anecdote, very important anecdote. Mariam, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I think on the flip side, what was happening in Pakistan, and it's been very depressing as a Pakistani food writer, is that because so much of Pakistan's initial identity was based on opposition to India, and so the overemphasization on the Muslim part, and but every time would, somebody would ask, what's distinctive about Pakistani food? What makes Pakistani food different from Indian food? The answer would always be like beef. Matlab, anybody would ask this, somehow it would always just resort to beef, because that was the one thing that somehow everybody could understand, that this is how Pakistan is different from India. And it was just because, I think it was just because of the state's like over reliance on just sort of religion as a crush of sort of like defining ourselves. And I think that for me was kind of like, it is political, because it comes at the expense of a much more nuanced understanding of Pakistani food. And like, several decades in, like Pakistani food writers like me are struggling to try to break out of the fact that no, Pakistani food isn't just beef dishes. Yes, Pakistani is also cooked vegetables. Yes, there's more to Pakistani food than just Punjabi food, or like Delhi food that's influenced by Delhi. So I think that part has just been a little bit frustrating, and it's been an uphill challenge for a lot of us, recipe developers, content creators, and food writers, because you have to kind of really just sort of break out of the fact that, okay, Pakistani food is more than just religion, and it's more than just sort of like it's more than its opposition to India. So I think that's kind of my response to that.
Thank you so much for that answer, Mariam. So I think we had a great panel to talk about food and partition, and I think such panels are very rare to find, because we often limit our conversations to political aspects of the partition, or experiences of the refugees, but we often forget about culture, or how it impacted our food cultures or textiles or other. And I think that is one of the aims of our Karwaan Bathak, that we touch on these not so talked about, or lesser known themes of partition, aspects of partition. So thank you so much to all our speakers, Preetha ma'am, for bringing out the Bengal aspect in it, because Bengal again remains untouched in all of our narrative of partition. That's a sad part of our history, that we forget about Bengal, which I think faced a lot more than the
Yes.
Punjab side of the subcontinent. So thank you so much for bringing that up, Professor Pant. Thank you so much, Mariam and Chef Barar, who had to leave after his very enlightening and insightful opening remarks. Thank you so much to all of you. Before we end, to just brush our egos and to have something for our PR, we would like to ask all of you about your experience of Karwaan Batak. If you'd like to say anything about Karwaan, how was this panel? Professor Pant, if we can start with you.
No, I think I'll start with you. Ishan, you do a great job every time you organize a Batak, but this time when you are sharing the spotlight with Sadaf, I think is even better. You should continue the Jugalbandi, and it is, as usual, always exciting. The panel was absolutely fascinating.
Thank you, Pan साहब हम साथ में आते रहेंगे.
Thank you, sir. Preetha ma'am.
Oh, this was my first time with you, and I really enjoyed it. And I do follow y'all actually, So I know that you're doing very good work, and it really enthuses me to see young people like you doing this.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Very, very, very good.
And we look forward to hosting you for a lecture that we have promised. Once you're back from Singapore, I think we are going to host you to talk about the history of Bengali food. Mariam, anything to add before we?
I mean, it was a pleasure. I mean, I think it was an amazing panel, and I loved the initiative. And thank you for reaching out to across the border. I think just makes the conversation a lot more interesting, and I learned a lot. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I would like to thank my co-host Adab Bhai for taking the lead in today's conversation, because I remain a non-food history background person. And I'm not also a foodie, because I limit myself to only vegetarian options. I don't like to explore that much of food.
You come to Bengal, we'll give you a different vegetable 365 days. I promise you.
I'll definitely come to Bengal
Yes.
It will be similar to what besides correct with the Jamai Phota, what is called?
Jamai Shushti.
Jamai Shashti.
Jamai Shashti. So you'll be treated so similarly.
then. I'm a
Yes.
hybrid. I'm a hybrid vegetarian who likes to eat, boneless chicken. So yeah.
इनको चिकन का भरता भी खिला देंगे, इनको 5
हाँ,
तरह का आलू भी
chicken
खिला देंगे.
bharta. हाँ, chicken bharta. 5 kinds of aloo. 25 kinds of sags. How much do you want? 365 dals. I'll give you. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I promise to be at your place in Gurgaon then.
Sure. And very nice meeting
Thank
you,
you so much.
Mariam.
It's really pleasure. Thank you.
It's very nice meeting you.
Thank you so
Lovely
much,
meeting you as
everybody.
well. It was a pleasure. Thank you, guys.